Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. Another 2023 NBA mock draft so early on in the cycle, but we've already covered this NBA draft with pretty good depth. A lot of first round mock drafts and really going through some of the prospects as well in some scouting reports. We've already done Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, and there's a lot more planned as well coming up on the channel. So make sure you guys hit that like button on today's mock draft and also subscribe to the channel for more year-long mock drafts. Here's our video preview for today. This mock draft is based on the standings as of the morning of November 14th, 2022. So before any games played that Monday. This video is not coming out on Monday. It'll come out a little bit later in the week. So maybe the order will look a little bit different on the standings the day you see it. But again, it's based on the standings of November 14th, 2022. And then go follow Utility Sports on Twitter. We have the link in the description. We're going to respond to every direct message we receive over the next 48 hours that this video comes out, because we want to hear your guys' thoughts on the channel. If you have any video ideas, I'd love to hear that. Last year, I did a ton of video ideas requested by you guys in my Twitter mentions and also in the YouTube comment section. So leave some comments there as well. I do take time to read every single comment that has ever been posted on the channel. So please leave comments for me. I like reading them, especially the nice ones. Some of the not nice ones are fun to read though too. So let's get into it now with the first overall pick, the Houston Rockets. The time I'm recording this, they do have the worst record in the NBA, but that's not necessarily a bad thing for this team. They're really, really young. They're still learning. I'm not sure if Steven Silas is going to be the coach of the future for this team. Not sure if he's the long-term answer. I think Rockets fans aren't super concerned if he is or isn't right now. I think they're mostly concerned with the development of some of the young guys, which it is important having the right coach for that. Steven Silas does oversee some of the development there. But overall, the Rockets organization, they've done a good job up to this point. I think giving the young guys opportunities to learn, grow. And I think we've seen that specifically from some of their guards. Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., those two guys I think have taken steps forward in the right direction. Specifically Jalen Green, he's the one I really want to focus on. He's upwards of 21 points a game this year. I think he's really playing good basketball right now. He's had some really timely buckets. Now he also has some questionable decisions in clutch situations, but that's part of that learning process, right? Young players, if they're sitting on the bench, they're not going to necessarily get that learning experience as much. So I think it's really good here for Houston, even if it does mean that they're trading off some winning seasons here. They're not going to win for a while with this young core. They're still in a spot where, hey, we can add more talent because we're going to be bad. And we're also giving our young guys the opportunities to grow, get better, and hopefully grow together. And that's really where we're going to see this team take a jump forward, is if something like this happens, if they get the first overall pick and the team continues to get better and better each and every day, they could become a really serious contender, especially with Victor Wembanyama on their roster. He is, if not the best prospect I've ever evaluated, he's top two. And the only one that I would even put in this conversation with him is Luka Doncic, who I was very high on before the draft. In his class, I thought that the Phoenix Suns were going to take him first overall, especially after they hired his former coach, Igor. I thought, hey, this is going to be the perfect blend of events here for Phoenix. They're going to find the guard that they've been looking for to put next to Devin Booker. Obviously, they decided to stay with the local kid, which does make some sense too. Ayton's been a really nice player for them. But Luka Doncic was my number one player in that class, and I didn't even think it was close. Victor Wembanyama is number one in this class, and again, I don't really think it's that close. He's such a special talent. Here's the thing. On TikTok, I saw this guy saying that Victor Wembanyama is not a top 10 pick, and he's going to average 7 points, 4 rebounds his first year. First of all, that guy doesn't know basketball. If you're listening to somebody and they don't think Victor Wembanyama should be a top 1 or 2 pick, they don't know what they're talking about, quite frankly. And I'm all for difference of opinion. I really am. You guys know last year I really liked Jaden Ivey. That was not the consensus. I don't care what the consensus is, but you watch this kid, he's the first overall pick. I really don't think there's even an argument to be had that Scoot Henderson could be first overall. I just really think Victor Wembanyama is the selection regardless. But I think there's at least a conversation that maybe you can have there. But you can't argue that this guy's not a top 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever player in this class. He's the number one guy in here. Now, is it going to play out that way? Potentially not. And that's where, if some injuries go down or, some stuff happens, it happens. But Victor Wembanyama, he's just too good of a prospect. We've never seen a player like him at his size. You think back to like Yao Ming back in the early 2000s when he came out and the Houston Rockets drafted him first. You're kind of seeing a similar type of player, except this one has more perimeter talent. He's got a better shooting stroke. And he's probably a better defender on day one of his NBA career than Yao was. Yes, Yao was huge and really impacted shots at the rim. Wembanyama is a little bit more switchable. I think can hang out in space a little bit better. He's just the all-around prospect. I think Giannis put it best. He can shoot like Kevin Durant. He can block like Rudy Gobert. He's a tough player to pass on first overall. I don't think anyone will. I do have a scouting profile on the channel of him. Make sure to go check that one out. And then second overall here, the Charlotte Hornets just had not had the beginning of the season that they would like. At the time I'm recording this, I believe they're 3-11. And it's just not been pretty for this team. LaMelo Ball obviously did make his debut just recently. They did lose in his debut, but he's the bright spot to this team, which is what makes it a little funky here picking second overall for Charlotte's perspective. Because if they get first, Victor Wembanyama is like the obvious clear selection for them. You have that dynamic center with the dynamic point guard, kind of what we've seen in NBA history for the most part. You think back to Magic and Kareem, think back to Stockton, Malone. Yes, Malone was a power forward, but still a big man. Nonetheless, you are always looking for the ball handler, big man combination. Kobe, Shaq as well. Another good example of that. Here, they're going to go ball handler. And I still think it's worth doing. Scoot Henderson, just clearly the second best player in the class at this point. Every mock draft right now in the cycle is going to start with Wembanyama, Scoot 1 and 2. It just needs to be that way. Charlotte would take Scoot Henderson here. Otherwise, they would explore trade down options, maybe. But I would be really hard-pressed to pass on Scoot Henderson. I think the best video we have on the channel is my Scoot Henderson breakdown on a really in-depth scouting profile that I spent a ton of time on. Probably the video I worked the hardest on the channel. Work hard on pretty much all the videos, but that one I really went deep into what I was working on, put together a bunch of edits for that. So I'm going to link that here. Please go watch that video if you want to know more about Scoot Henderson. But for Charlotte's perspective here, you're just going with the talent. You're getting the best player on the board. And then you figure it out later, whether that means Scoot and LaMelo play together. I still think that's viable. Otherwise, you might have to make some tough decisions down the road, but get the talent in the door and then figure it out from there. Pick 3 now, the Detroit Pistons on the clock here. They are also 3-11. And for Detroit, they're kind of an interesting spot. Cade Cunningham, been a little up and down this year. I think he's going to have some really bright moments, though, this year. I'm not worried about Cade Cunningham. Do not sell your Cade Cunningham stock. He's a very good NBA player, and I think he's going to continue to get better. Just because he plays like a veteran in some ways doesn't mean he's not a finished product yet. Jaden Ivey has had some really bright moments as well. Now, defensively, we knew there was going to be some issues and struggles early on. He's definitely shown that. But overall, you feel pretty good about the direction of this team, even while they're losing. The Bojan Bogdanovic extension was a little weird to me, but overall, I understand what they're going for. I do like Detroit's roster currently as it sits, and I think once they develop their guys a little bit more, get a little bit further into this rebuild, we're going to see some real production from this team. And third overall, I think Dariq Whitehead kind of fills the one need left that I see on this roster, which is another reliable offensive wing next to Sadiq Bey. Kind of look at the team, and it's kind of funny, the guy they're missing right now, Jeremy Grant, probably would be a really nice option on this team. But with Bojan Bogdanovic there, I understand what they were trying to do, get a four-man who's a veteran, help the young guys out. Yeah, but they could really use someone who's a little bit more athletic and a little bit better defensively. I think Dariq Whitehead will become that at the NBA level. Plus, there's a good argument to be had that he's just one of the best shooters in the draft this year. And he's not even one of those pure shooter archetypes where he's just going to catch and shoot. He does it off the move. He does off pin downs, flares, moving left and right. Really tough shots that he's able to knock down. He's got really good body control as a shooter. Plays with really good balance. I think that's really the main starting point when you're talking about Dariq Whitehead and why he's a good offensive player. It's all about balance. He is consistently centered in his frame of attack, and I think that really empowers him to be a good offensive player at the NBA level. And he's a sneaky athlete. You watch him and he's not reliant on the athleticism like some young prospects are, but he has it when he needs it. And I think that's a really good sign here for Detroit. If you have a young core of Cade, Ivey, Dariq Whitehead, Sadiq Bey, with Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart sharing those center minutes, I really like the direction of this team. Now, again, they're really young. They're probably not going to win for a couple of years, but they are getting closer and closer to becoming a really dangerous team, especially come playoff time. I think, not right now, but 2-3 years from now, they're going to make a lot of noise, especially when some of these players get into their 4th, 5th, 6th years of their career. that's when we see some players really explode and take off. Detroit's going to have a collection of those guys. Troy Weaver, for the most part, has done a really good job there in that rebuild. He inherited basically nothing with Stan Van Gundy calling the shots. Stan Van Gundy basically drove this organization into the ground, and Troy Weaver slowly dug them out of it. And now I would say that they're at a spot where everyone really likes what they have. They've gotten lucky in the lottery. The Cade Cunningham pick definitely helps, but I think Ivy at 5, Jalen Duren last year as well. Those selections really help, and I think that they're in a really strong spot moving forward. Pick number 4, the New Orleans Pelicans here now. This pick comes from the Los Angeles Lakers. And everyone, take a deep breath with me, because it might be one of the last times we get to do it. I'm really worried that the Pelicans might luck in to the number 1 or number 2 pick from what is one of the more polarizing trades in NBA history, honestly, with the Anthony Davis trade. A lot of people say, hey, look, the Lakers clearly win that trade. They won a championship. Some people say, hey, look, the Lakers clearly lose that trade. Brandon Ingram's playing kind of at the same level as Anthony Davis this year and last year. And, honestly, the Pelicans have all these picks coming up. This one might be top 5, could even be top 2. I think that it's a win-win for both sides, because the Lakers did get the championship that they, in the bubble, which is a very legit championship. And if you want to say, oh, that's an easy championship to win, well, that makes it even more embarrassing for the 29 teams that didn't win it. But here's the thing as well. There's a way to go about trying to win without sacrificing your entire future. The Lakers did not do that. Rob Pelinka did not do that. And now the Pelicans are reaping the benefits of that. And 4th overall here, they're going to swing on the upside of guard Amen Thompson, playing for Overtime Elite. He's raw still at this point. What you're going to hear about this kid is he's 6'7". He's got a really good wingspan. He's athletic, and he can read the floor. And all of those things are true. I think he's a developing point guard who's going to be able to do a lot of different things in an offense once he grows into what he's supposed to be. The issue right now, though, his skill set's just not as far along as everyone else thinks. ESPN is going to start shoving this kid down your throat once they really figure out who he is. A lot of ESPN writers are going to like this kid because they're going to see the physicals. They're going to see some of the highlights. This kid looks awesome in highlight reels. When you watch his full games yet, you can see there's still some pieces missing, but there's still a lot of talent to work with there. I think he's worthy of a top 5 to 7 selection right now. So him at 4 here is not a reach by any means, but it's not like he's going to come into the league and average 18 and 8. Okay. He's going to probably need a year or two to really adjust. Right now, he's playing a lot of prep schools, which, if you know anything about the prep circuit, it's just not nearly as good as high-level college competition, overseas competition, and definitely not NBA-level talent. So, Amen Thompson's going to have a little bit of adjustment to do. Now, I think he's got a lot of the talents you're looking for long-term. He can play make for others. I think he's a good passer when the play's there for him. Now, I think sometimes he forces stuff, leaves his feet a little too early. And the shooting stroke is really the biggest concern for me. And the big issue, too, I think he thinks he's a shooter. He hasn't been a good shooter up to this point of his young career. Now, is it possible he can really develop and turn it around? Yes, and I think going to New Orleans would be a great spot for that because they have some of the best shooting coaches in the NBA there. But it's going to take a little bit of time. Yes, they took Dyson Daniels. Pick 4, though, they have to go upside. They just have so much talent already that they don't need this pick to be a safe one. But if they turn this pick into a superstar level player, which is what Amen Thompson has potential to become, well, then watch out. The NBA is in trouble because the Pelicans are coming. Pick number 5, the Orlando Magic here now, and talk about a perfect season. Orlando's having everything go the way that they would want it to go this year. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. They have another pick here in the top 10 coming up with just a few picks from now. But my point here is Paolo Banchero looks awesome. Their number 1 pick looks justified. I picked him to win Rookie of the Year, and it looks like he's a very safe pick to do that. He's been awesome this year. I think his athleticism has been even more impressive than I was expecting. And I think he's just flat out a good player. So Orlando feels good about that. Franz Wagner looks good. Wendell Carter still looks pretty good. Bull, is it a resurrection tour? Everything's going right for Orlando, specifically since they aren't winning a ton of games, but they have close competitive games, which is about that development. They are learning how to win by losing right now. They're learning what doesn't work, and hopefully down the road they adjust to what does work. And as they add in more talent like they do here, 5th overall, going with guard Nick Smith Jr., who I prefer over Amen Thompson, at least at this point of the draft process. Things can definitely change. We still are only in November. There's a lot ahead of us. Nick Smith Jr. hasn't even played a collegiate game yet, but in high school, his final year, averaged 27 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists. So you're looking at somebody who can impact the game in a bunch of ways. He's a little bit smaller. He's not quite Amen Thompson's size, obviously. He's more of a prototypical point guard in terms of height, but I think that's what Orlando needs. Somebody who can read the floor. He's a really good distributor. He's selfless in that aspect of the game, but he's also somebody who knows how to score when he has to. He's got a very adept floater that helps him navigate in the lane and avoid shot blocking. And I also think he's just somebody who he's going to be a big shot maker for his career. He's kind of got that it factor to him when you watch him play, and he knows how good he is. And that's one of the biggest challenges for some young players, especially at the guard spot, is really trusting in the talent that they have and being able to execute when the going gets tough. And I think Nick Smith Jr. is going to do all of that. If Orlando gets him here, the core of Nick Smith Jr., Jalen Suggs back at a combo guard spot, which I think really fits better for him than playing point guard, and all the length-size wing play that they already have, Orlando's kind of got a really good head start here on this rebuild with another pick coming up here in the first round. Pick 6, the Golden State Warriors, and there's a lot of drama right now about Golden State, especially on Twitter, which I try to stay away from because, well, some people just get on the app and say whatever they want. If you're somebody who thinks that they need to trade the young guys right now, you just need to reel it back a little bit. Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, James Wiseman, I know that they haven't played great. The three of them together are like 21 years old and younger. Like, you just can't give up on players because they're not winning basketball games right now. Like, if they went to the Rockets, they'd probably be 2 or 3 starting level players for that team. And yes, they'd be losing a ton, but they'd be learning. The whole point right now in Golden State is to give them some play time. And if you lose some games, you lose some games. Now, obviously, right now, Golden State's a little panicked because they're 6-8. They're just not playing that great. Hopefully, they can turn it around, and I expect they will. They're 0-7 on the road this year at the time I'm recording this, which is a problem. But, I mean, they're still the G League. Practice is an important time for these young guys as well. So even when they're not getting play time, which they haven't the last couple of games, it's not the end of the world because they still have other opportunities to learn. They have opportunities to grow. The Warriors should just not trade them now. You don't cut bait, especially at the low price point where they're at right now, where teams are just saying, oh, they're not playing that great. Maybe we can get them for cheaper. The Warriors have these good young players to develop, and if they stayed up this high, they would get another one here with forward Cam Whitmore, who I think is a little bit more NBA ready than guys like Jonathan Kuminga and James Wiseman were. He's a little bit more cut of the cloth of Moses Moody, and I think Warriors fans know exactly what I'm talking about in terms of Moody being probably the most pro-ready player out of the 3 of those young guys there in Golden State. Cam Whitmore, I would say, is even more pro-ready. We saw him dominate this past summer for USA U20 basketball. He was the MVP of the team and just quite frankly outplayed pretty much everyone that got in their way this year. Cam Whitmore is a dunking machine. He's highly athletic, but offensively, he knows how to take over a game if he has to. I think we'll see that quite a bit this year for Villanova. But he's also got the skill set to be a complementary ancillary piece for an NBA team, which is really what a team would draft him to do. Kind of think Andrew Wiggins-esque here in terms of what he's going to provide to Golden State. And that's really what you want. As many Andrew Wiggins as you can have on your team is really good, especially when you have a star player like Steph Curry. You want to fill out this roster with as many good rotation players as possible. Cam Whitmore, I think, is going to be a very, very high-end rotation player. And somebody who I think is going to be a starter in this league for a long time. Pick 7 now, the Brooklyn Nets here at this spot. They're also 6-8. They've had their fair of struggles, but Kevin Durant's still one of the most interesting players in the world, especially when it comes to trade value. We'll see if the Nets maybe make a sell move this year. I do have a video up on the channel of that, so make sure to go check that out. But the Brooklyn Nets here, if they stay around this range, I think the writing's on the wall. Kyrie Irving is not the long-term point guard of the Brooklyn Nets, and I say that with a little bit of a laugh because I think that should be obvious for everybody. Even if he does play again this year for them, I don't think that they're going to give him a long-term contract after this year. So Keontae George becomes the obvious fill-in pick here. Guard from Baylor has looked really good to start the year. Now, his shooting numbers haven't been as good as I would have hoped, but he's made some really impactful plays. I think his athleticism's been on full display. And I think as the year goes on, he's going to become a reliable shot maker for Baylor. And the one thing I really like about this Baylor program, there's some senior guards there. You look at some of the guys in that building that can help him out. Adam Flagler's one that comes to mind as somebody who can, maybe show him the ropes a little bit. I think this is going to be a really good development year for Keontae George. I think he's going to learn a lot of how to play the point guard position. and really grow as an overall player in this game. The Nets are getting a good one here at 7. I really like Keontae George and his offensive skill set. And again, like I said, the athleticism's there. If he just shines defensively at moments, I think he holds his stock up into the top 10 here. Pick number 8, the Utah Jazz here. Now, this pick comes from the Minnesota Timberwolves. Please exercise some patience. The Timberwolves are not going to be this bad all year long. Just please give them a little bit of time. They're like 2 games below 500, and everyone's sounding the alarms. The Boston Celtics were 12-13 last season by December 1st. Please, please, please do not worry about this team yet. But right now, picks at number 8, Utah Jazz pick in here. And I have them going with forward Emoni Bates from Eastern Michigan. And he had his shining performance against Michigan in an in-state battle, and one that I think a lot of executive scouts are going to point to as the Emoni Bates game, the one that locked him up into being a for sure first-round pick. And as you can see here, he has moved up significantly in where I'm mocking him. Last mock draft, I had him at number 22. He jumps all the way up to number 8. The talent's always been there for Emoni Bates. It's all been about putting it together. For someone who's been such an internet sensation, I think he's handled fame pretty well. Last year, he struggled a ton for Memphis. No question about it. He became unplayable at moments for Penny Hardaway, and he transferred out of there, which was a really good decision for him. You could just tell he wasn't comfortable adjusting to the collegiate game. And remember, he wasn't even old enough last year to register for the NBA draft. That's how young of a college player he was, because he reclassified, went to college a year early. Maybe not the best decision for him, honestly, but it seems like it's all working out now. He seems a lot more comfortable. He's the man of the offense here, and I think it's a really great opportunity for Danny Ainge. This is Danny Ainge's MO. He likes to draft wings. He likes to draft wings who can handle the basketball. Emoni Bates does that, and there's a lot of scoring potential here. If the Utah Jazz can get their hand on Emoni Bates, I would not be surprised if Danny Ainge pulls the trigger on it on draft night. I still think this kid's got a ton of talent. When you watch him play, the eye test goes crazy. He is a very talented basketball player. Again, it's just all about putting it all together. Now, if he has a ton of 3 for 15 games the rest of the year, probably won't keep him this high. But he's going to be someone who impresses in one-on-one workouts, one-on-all workouts. As we get closer to April, draft process is going to really, I think, shine favorably on him in some of those settings. And I also think this year for Eastern Michigan, he's going to be able to showcase himself a lot, which is why I like him now as a lottery pick. I think it's pretty safe to put him into that conversation. Pick number 9 here now. This is the Orlando Magic on the clock again. Remember, we went with Nick Smith earlier at pick number 5. And this pick comes from the Bulls. And if this plays out this way, you will have seen the Magic net 2 top 10 picks for Nikola Vucevic as well as Wendell Carter. They got Franz Wagner with the first one. And with the second one here, I have them going out and getting forward Brandon Miller from Alabama, who I think is a very solid athlete. I think offensively needs to come along a little bit in his development as a scorer. But you can see the physical components being there. And we see this a lot in the NBA draft, where players like Brandon Miller, who, 6'7", 6'8", lengthy wings who are athletic, they tend to get valued pretty high and pretty consistently in the lottery. And I think Brandon Miller is a great example of this here. He's going to be a lottery pick. Feel very confident saying that. In Orlando, they kind of have a tell here of what they like to do. They like to draft some of these athletic wings. We saw them do it with Franz Wagner. We saw him do it now with Paolo Banchero. And seeing him do it with Brandon Miller here just makes sense. They have kind of a thing that they like to look at, and an archetype that they like to draft on the wing. And Brandon Miller kind of hits all of those checkpoints. And he's going to be a nice piece for them. Now, I think coming off the bench early in his career at the NBA level is going to be really good for him. I don't think he's ready to contribute right away. I wouldn't even be surprised if he spent some time with the Lakeland Magic as well, developing the G League a little bit more, letting him be the guy down there for a little bit. But either way, Orlando's getting a ton of talent here in this draft. And I think they're adding some really good key pieces that'll help them really develop long-term into becoming a good NBA franchise. Pick number 10, San Antonio here now. Spurs fans, I think you guys keep biting your fingernails, a little nervous about where you guys are going to end up in the draft. A lot of people were expecting the Spurs to be one of the worst or, bottom 3 teams in the league at least. Hasn't played out this year. Maybe Greg Popovich is just too good of a head coach. But at 10 here, I think it's possible they still continue to rise up. But I have him going with forward/guard Ausar Thompson. And for fairness to him, I'm not going to compare him to his brother. I have done that in some of the videos already, and I will throughout the year because they're twins. It's pretty likely that they're going to draw a lot of comparisons to each other. I mean, they look the exact same, and they play pretty similarly. But Ausar Thompson himself, I think there's a lot of 3-and-D wing potential here, but he's a little bit more than that as well. He's highly athletic, which sometimes you get in a 3-and-D wing, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to kind of get more of the flat-footed guys who aren't going to jump out of the gym. Well, Ausar Thompson does. He's got really good athleticism, good balance, and his playmaking, I think, is coming along. There's certain times where he makes passes that are, I would consider, flashpoints, where a team's going to look at that and try and sell themselves on, hey, if he can do this a little bit more consistently, if we can really work this into his game a little bit more and really bring out this side of him, we might have a steal here. And I think Ausar Thompson's somebody who I wouldn't be shocked if he goes as high as maybe 5th or 6th overall in the draft this year, because some teams are going to really like what they see in him in terms of the talent, upside, the potential. And I could see it too. I think 10 right now is kind of the safe landing zone for him. I think he's going to be in this area for the most part, but I think San Antonio, this is the type of player that they would really like to add if they're at the spot. They'll probably end up higher than this when it comes to the actual draft, but let's say they are hovering around here. I think Ausar Thompson's definitely someone on the board for them. Next, now we have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who they were number 1 in the most recent mock draft, now down to number 11, and it's in part due to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Josh Giddey. Those two guys are such good guards. They put up 145 points on Tom Thibodeau and the New York Knicks the other night. And Josh Giddey, only the second player ever to have 2 triple-doubles in his first 2 career games at Madison Square Garden. The other player to do that, Wilt Chamberlain. Obviously, player A and player B are quite similar, right? Josh Giddey and Wilt Chamberlain, cut of the same cloth, I would say. I'm joking. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a star in this league. He is one of the 25 best players in the world. And if any team was smart right now, they would try and offer the whole kit and caboodle and see if Sam Presti's actually willing to trade him or not. Because if they could get Shai from this team, Shai's a player that could be a number 2 on a championship level team at this point. I firmly believe that. It's almost a disservice how bad Oklahoma City is around him for the most part. They just have no size or physicality, which is what we're addressing here with Jarace Walker from Houston. Now, I know they drafted Chet Holmgren last year, and there's some of that size, but they're still missing that physicality. And I think Jarace Walker, who is a really strong physical 4, kind of fits into what Oklahoma City would need here. Yes, they have Jeremiah Robinson-Earl. I think he'd be a nice backup piece to this team. You just can't play JRE 35 minutes a night and expect to win a ton of games in the NBA. Jarace Walker, on the other hand, though, I think you can, because he's a really solid offensive player. We've seen him already hit a couple threes this year for Houston. He's got a very nice mid-range game, whether it's back to the basket or in face-up settings. And like I said, the physicality is just there. He's a good athlete. He's strong. He's going to be able to play in the post, both offensively and defensively. And he can drive the basketball a bit too. And he doesn't really feel guys when he is penetrating toward the rim because he is so big and strong. And I think that's the type of archetype of a player you want to put around Chet Holmgren, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey. Those 3 guys don't necessarily blow you away with their physicals or their strength. Obviously, Chet's so big and lengthy, but Jarace Walker's a filled out buff dude. He walks into the gym and he looks like a man. And that's kind of what Oklahoma City, I think, needs here at this spot. Plus, he's just a really talented, skilled player. You could argue that he maybe will go as high as 5th overall as well. I think this, 5 through 11 range is kind of where there's a lot of openings in. Hey, we don't really know who's going where quite yet. I think that there's some good ideas on who could end up where. But really, as the season plays out, we're going to have better understanding of how the draft boards are really shaking up to that point. Pick 12, the Miami Heat here now. And this team, I'm hoping that they get things figured out, because at this point you would expect, 15 games in, the Heat are probably a playoff team and they're kind of sitting in playoff position. Right now, they're a play-in team, which is a little bit scarier. Now, I'm not doubting this team. I think that they will be a playoff team, but with where they currently sit, they're picking 12th, and I have them going with forward Dillon Mitchell, a player who, again, I think is in that 5 to 11, 5 to 12-ish range where, he could skyrocket up boards. He could maybe fall down a little bit. He's somebody who, again, the physicals are all there for him, but in high school, he played significantly without the basketball. Most notably, was kind of a rim runner and somebody who caught a lot in the dunker spot. And that's not something that's going to get you drafted in the top 5 unless you're like a really physical dominant center. Dillon Mitchell's not going to be that. He's going to be a hybrid 3.5 type forward where he plays a little bit at the 3, more of his time at the 4 though. And I think that at Texas this year, we're going to see him continue to take strides forward. I'd like to see him do some more stuff with the ball, especially for his own draft grade. But Miami here, this works out perfectly because they need more forward play. You could also argue they need a guard. If they're picking a little bit higher and they were in that Keontae George range, that's probably who I would have mocked to them. But Dillon Mitchell here, I think, is pretty solid, safe selection in terms of the values here. Could see some upside popping for him. Miami does a really great job drafting outside of the top 10. We've seen some big hits for them. Bam Adebayo, I think, being one of the most notable. Tyler Hero as well. This team does a good job in this range drafting, and I think Dillon Mitchell would be a really nice pickup for them. Pick 13 now, the New York Knicks here. They have 2 picks in this first round as well. The second coming from the Dallas Mavericks. And at 13, I have the New York Knicks going with guard Anthony Black. Quentin Grimes, welcome to the starting lineup. Evan Fournier to the bench. I still think this team needs a little bit more defensive playmaking though, and Anthony Black does that for you. He's a 6'7" guard with good playmaking feel, but I think the one thing that really stands out to me watching him, he's a ball hawk and he knows he can go and get the basketball whenever he wants it. He's an adept pickpocket type of guard where he's going to be comfortable reaching on you because of how long his arms are, and he trusts his recovery speed and athleticism. Now, I think he's got to tone that back a little bit once he gets to the NBA, just dealing with some of the quickness of other NBA level guards. But he's the type of player that if he's going up against somebody who doesn't have a super tight handle or is super used to working in pressure, well, he's going to pick you and he's going to do it consistently. I like his upside a lot. The big question mark for him is, will that shot come around? And will he be a reliable player off the ball offensively? That I'm not completely sure on yet. I think we're going to learn more and more about that as the year goes on here at Arkansas. But, coming to the NBA level, he's a player who should go in the lottery this year, and the New York Knicks get a really nice piece that I think can help them long term. Pick 14, Sacramento Kings, and hey, they're winning. A little bit of a win streak here as I record this video. The Kings have been rolling, and you would hope so, right? They traded their best young player in Tyrese Haliburton for a guy who's already an established all-star. They should be winning, and they are to a certain extent. Right now, they're projected to be in the play-in, but they're making strides, and I have them going with forward Baba Miller from Florida State. He's a 6'11" forward. Harrison Barnes is headed toward free agency, and I think that they still could use more wing talent, even if they do retain Harrison Barnes as well. Baba Miller is one of the perfect players to put next to Domantas Sabonis, and I think a lot of people are going to deem Baba Miller as a high-risk, high-reward prospect because of the ball handling and the offensive creation. I think that's the biggest question mark right now that everybody has is, are we going to buy into Baba Miller being an offensive creator? Is he someone we can go to, or are we just looking at him as kind of like a 3-and-D wing with a little bit extra length? And that's why I don't see him as a high-risk player. I see there's high reward in drafting him. I don't see him as much high risk because let's say he doesn't grow into becoming a go-to offensive player with on-ball creation. Well, he's 6'11". He's got arms that go on for days, as Jay Billis would say during draft coverage. And he's, going to block shots around the rim. He's going to make plays defensively, and he'll knock down open shots. Those are kind of all the qualities you're looking for. And to get a player here at 14, I believe that the NBA draft has a ton of talent every single year, and there's a lot of pieces that you can find even late in the draft. But if you're going to get a player like Baba Miller at 14 consistently, you're going to be very happy with the results, in my opinion. The Kings get a really nice fit to their team and just flat out a good player who belongs in the lottery as well. Pick 15, Indiana now on the clock. This is their own pick. They have 2 more draft picks coming in this one as well. Derek Lively, a player who I believe is a lottery level talent. I believe he should be in the top 10 even. I think he's got all the physical tools you're looking for. And for a team here in the Pacers who I think they're going to consider trade offers for Miles Turner. Now, nothing's given. They might hold on to him. Miles Turner is only 26 years old at the time I'm recording this. He will turn 27 in March, but he's kind of fits the timeline, honestly. You got 5-6 more good years ahead of you. You don't have to trade Miles Turner if you don't want to, but let's assume they do. Derek Lively becomes the obvious no-brainer selection here for him. Really athletic big who does some incredible things that kind of leave your mouth wide open saying, wow, couldn't believe I just saw that. He jumps out of the gym. He's a force down low. He's not your traditional back to the basket big. We haven't really seen a ton of those in recent years, just with how the game's changed. So much pick and roll basketball, so much spacing the floor from the big man spot. I think Derek Lively's got a little bit of a perimeter skill set that he hasn't been able to showcase up to this point. And maybe in the NBA, he'll be able to lean into that. Think about Miles Turner. Miles Turner didn't really get to play that way in college either. And then once he was in the NBA, he kind of started to lean that way more and more. First year, shot mostly twos. Second year in the league, he started taking more and more threes, and we know how that story went for Indiana. I think Derek Lively could arguably pan out the same way, and I think he's a really nice piece to grab here at 15. Pick 16, the Brooklyn Nets here are on the board again. This pick is really complicated in terms of how the swap rights work. It's a 3-team swap, so if this pick is the lowest of the Jazz selections, then the Jazz would get this. But since the Jazz, their current pick is slated to be lower than this, it would stay with the Brooklyn Nets. So here at 16, I have the Brooklyn Nets taking G.G. Jackson. Forward from South Carolina. Remember earlier on we went with Keontae George, a guard. I think here it's about getting more athleticism and more actual physical talent in the building. I think at times when you watch Brooklyn, one thing that pops out to me is this team doesn't really get to the lane that much. They don't have a lot of on-ball creation outside of Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and even those two do a lot of their work from the perimeter. So you bring in somebody who is athletic as G.G. Jackson. He's comfortable playing downhill. He does a lot of his work at the rim, not because he has to, but because he can. And he can beat guys off the dribble every once in a while, but he's just really adept playing without the basketball, which is what makes him a good fit here next to Kevin Durant, assuming KD's still in town. And next to Cam Thomas, who's also, we've seen a big uptick in his minutes since Steve Nash was let go. And Jacques Vaughn is putting a lot of confidence in him, and he's playing well. So I think G.G. Jackson could be a nice fit next to those two guys long term. The Nets have a ton of question marks right now. If they come out of this draft, though, with Keontae George, G.G. Jackson, the question marks start to diminish a little bit, and you feel pretty good about the young core that they're actually starting to build up again. Pick 17 now, the Toronto Raptors here on the board at this spot. Toronto, they've had a pretty good beginning to their season. You got to love the talent that they have on this roster, and we know how well they draft. And this is a perfect player that I think Raptors fans would acknowledge fits exactly what they would be looking for here. Cason Wallace, a guard from Kentucky who I think has a lot of two-way potential in this league. He's got strong hands. He's somebody who knows how to move his feet laterally. He's going to be able to keep his chest in between his man and the basket, which is one of the most important things when it comes to stopping straight line drives to the rim and stopping dribble drive penetration. Cason Wallace does those things, but he's also already flashed a little bit offensively for Kentucky, even more than I was originally anticipating. And Toronto here getting a backup guard. Yes, they have Malachi Flynn, but you can never have too many ball handlers. Now, I know Masai Ujiri really does like to lean into drafting length, athleticism, wingspan, size, but Cason Wallace here, I think it's a need. I think he's a good piece, and I think he's going to go right in this range, anywhere from 15 to 20 on draft night is kind of where I'm currently projecting Cason Wallace to go. Of course, a lot of things can still change. Don't hold me to this yet at this point because, we're 7 months away from the draft, basically. But Cason Wallace, a good player, and I think the Raptors get a good one here, and I would be confident in their ability to develop him. The Clippers here now at 18. The team's been playing pretty well without Kawhi Leonard. They're a little bit above 500 as I currently record this. I'm not too worried about the Clippers. The only thing, though, the last 4 years, the point guard position has just been a little spotty, a little inconsistent. I know they have Reggie Jackson. I know they have John Wall. Those are two players that I think are pretty good veterans. But I think long-term, they need somebody else in the building, and Terquavion Smith is the guy for me. I still do like Jason Preston as well. I think he's a good backup floor general in this league. But Terquavion Smith kind of gives you the run and gun, I'm able to score when I want to score type of mentality, and I think he's going to do a really nice job of this, even at the NBA level. And the nice thing is, since they have those veteran guards, in Jackson and Wall, Terquavion Smith doesn't have a lot of pressure on him to produce and perform right away. I think that he's going to be able to come off the bench, give you buckets, and that's what you're going to want him to do as he kind of comes up to speed with what does it take to be an NBA point guard. And he's got some good guys to learn from. You know, Reggie Jackson does it in a certain way. John Wall did it in a completely different way. Those two guys, I think, are going to be good role models for him and good players to learn under for the Los Angeles Clippers. Not that those two guys are going to take on mentor roles by any means, but, you know, he's going to see the way that they work. He's going to kind of learn the way that they look at the game. And specifically John Wall, I think his mentality, the way that he reads the floor. John Wall, you know, obviously got a lot of love for his athleticism, his defense, his finishing at the rim. Most underrated part of John Wall's game was his playmaking. He's one of the best passers in the NBA, probably one of the better passers in the NBA the last 15 years. He was so good in Washington. And a lot of it was not just athleticism, it was him reading the floor, dissecting defenses. He did a great job of that. I think Terquavion Smith could really learn a lot from him in that regard. Pick 19 now, the worst team in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Lakers here. This pick comes from the Pelicans. Pelicans own that swap right with the Lakers. We talked about them at number 4 in this draft. And here I have the Lakers going with guard Jalen Hood-Schifino from Indiana. This pick just needs to be about talent. You can't draft based off of fit. And if you tried, Rob Pelinka would screw that up anyway because he doesn't know what he's doing. Jalen Hood-Schifino is the right answer here for the Lakers, though, because he is somebody who I think talented ball handler. They need more backcourt talent. The Lakers just are kind of void of talent from, you know, guys 6 through 15 on their roster. They've got like 5 guys that you could say you reliably trust night to night. I know Austin Reeves some nights gives you some stuff. I'm not buying it long term. Jalen Hood-Schifino, though, probably somebody who can grow as a playmaker. We saw that quite a bit at Montverde. He's got some flashes to his game that you do like. I think he can score the ball in bunches. I think that he's able to take pressure off as a secondary ball handler at this point and a secondary creator. And if he continues to grow, maybe he becomes a low-end primary creator, which if you ask him to be your second creator as a low-end primary guy, you're at a pretty good spot with your roster long-term. The Lakers, it's really important that they hit on every draft pick that they have the next 2, 3, 4 years, because it doesn't get any prettier with the draft picks that they owe. They're going to give up some high picks and they need to hit. Kind of like the Brooklyn Nets did. Think back to when drafted Karis LeVert outside the lottery, Jarrett Allen outside the lottery. The Lakers need to have those types of returns here on draft nights, and I think Jalen Hood-Schifino a really good spot to start. Pick 21 here, or pick 20, excuse me now, the Washington Wizards here at this spot. They've been a really pleasant surprise. Kristaps Porzingis has been playing really good basketball for this team. Like I tried to warn everybody that he would. I think KP is still a good NBA player here. And I have the Wizards taking a very Tommy Shepard approach with Arthur Kaluma. This is, Wizards fans know exactly what I'm talking about. Think about it, 6'7" wing, mildly productive in college, defensive upside. You're like, oh yeah, this is who Tommy Shepard's going to draft. Arthur Kaluma, I really do like him as a prospect, though. I think, you know, last year as a freshman in the tournament with Ryan Kalkbrenner out, we got to see him kind of carry an offense. And that was the first time he got asked to do that all year long at Creighton. And he excelled, had over a 20-point game. And defensively, all the components are there. He's lengthy. He's athletic. And I think he's smart. And that's one of the most underrated aspects when it comes to prospect, scouting. When you really analyze what a player can bring, being in the right position consistently is one of the most important things in all of basketball. And Kaluma does that. So I think Washington here, who has some tough questions ahead of them with Rui Hachimura, Kyle Kuzma, who's going to be on this roster long-term. I think Kaluma gives you a little bit of, vindication there. And maybe it opens up Washington to make a move saying, hey, we don't need to hold on to all of these wings. Maybe Kispert becomes available. Maybe they make some moves to try and rebalance this roster. But Kaluma to Washington almost feels like a guarantee if the Wizards are picking around this spot. Pick 21, the Knicks now on the clock again, like I promised earlier. This pick comes from the Dallas Mavericks in that Kristaps Porzingis trade quite a while ago. And Eric Gaines would be the pick here. And it's really important that the Knicks get this right because it would be the only player on their roster from that Porzingis trade. I don't know how Knicks fans can consistently say that they won the Porzingis trade when they don't have a single player on their roster from that actual deal. They don't have anybody. Eric Gaines would then by last resort, be the only guy on their roster from the trade, which I don't think is a good one, giving up Hardaway Jr., Kristaps Porzingis for Eric Gaines. I don't think that's a great trade. But Eric Gaines, I do like as a young player. He is a junior at UAB, and he's gone down a little bit of a different path. Transferred from LSU this past season. Of course, Will Wade's firing kind of probably brought that on. And Eric Gaines, one of the most athletic players in the draft. He's only 6'2", but boy, does this guy jump out of the gym. Last year, he had that crazy float block that everyone remembers, but he's had some incredible on-ball moments this year as well, especially early in the preseason, where he's, going with a Euro step behind the back type move, keeping the rock and finishing above the rim on a finger roll. Those types of things make me think that Eric Gaines could go potentially in the first round, even as a junior. And it's not another realm of possibility. We saw a guy like Jake LaRavia last year who, a little bit older, not a freshman, but he's only 20 years old. And Eric Gaines is going to be 21 on draft night. So it's not like there's a real range here in terms of how old he is. He's pretty young still in the terms of the NBA. And I think the next year, who are looking to be competitive, Gaines would fit right in with them right away. 22 now, the Indiana Pacers on the clock again. This pick comes from Cleveland, the Cavaliers, in the trade that was Karis LeVert. So Pacers now here with this spot would go with forward Chris Murray. I think they're just looking for a little bit more reliable players to add into their front court. Chris Murray, I think, is a really good example of this. His brother Keegan Murray is really the prototype when it comes to consistency, reliability at the power forward spot. Chris Murray's not far behind him. He's someone who coaches are going to love. Rick Carlisle always has his favorites. Pacers fans, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I watched him this way in Dallas forever. Chris Murray, I think, would become one of Rick Carlisle's favorites right away. And that's important. He's going to get early minutes because he's going to be trusted upon. He's going to be smart. He's going to be in the right spot a lot, like I talked about with Kaluma. Chris Murray checks those boxes as well. And I think next to Benedict Mathurin, next to Tyrese Halliburton, next to some of these other young players there in Indiana, you can really count on that. Andrew Nembhard, by the way, Pacers fans, shout out to Andrew Nembhard. He's been playing really well defensively this year. So big props to him as well. 23 now, the Atlanta Hawks here on the clock. And this is a pick I like quite a bit. Hawks fans have been clamoring about a shooter since they traded Kevin Huerter away. Well, you get a pretty good one here in Grady Dick, one of the most consistent jump shots in this draft. He's got a very smooth stroke and somebody who you can tell was born to be a shooter, maybe by the melanin in his skin. It's just a joke. Grady Dick, though, he's actually more athletic than you would originally anticipate. And he's been playing good basketball for a top 10 ranked Kansas team. And I think Grady Dick, somebody who we're going to start to see him in first round mock drafts rather consistently. This is the first time he's appeared in mine. I was a little hesitant. I thought he was going to be a player that would maybe stick at Kansas for 2-3 years before coming out for the draft. I'm less sure of that now, and I think it's really possible that he actually does come out this year and that he's likely a first-round pick if he does. Pick 24 now, the Memphis Grizzlies here at this spot. Last year, they were very active on draft night. Got Jake LaRavia, got David Roddy, also drafted Kennedy Chandler in round 2. I think they had a really nice draft for themselves. And this year, I think they're going to continue to build up some of the talent that they have, the young talent. Kyle Filipowski, a center who is kind of like a Jaren Jackson Jr. light here. Doesn't really block shots like Jaren, but he's got the length to offer around the rim. And he's a shooter. He's somebody with touch from the perimeter. He's also a pretty solid playmaker. I think he's better in that regard than Jaren is. And if you're Memphis, you're looking at trying to find as much front court depth as possible, just with the amount of time Jaren has already missed at this point of his career. You have to be aware that he's going to miss 15 to 20 games a year probably, which it's not bad. It doesn't make Jaren Jackson Jr. a bad player or anything. But when you're looking at roster construction, you need to book in players that can fill in consistently. They've done a good job of that. Santi Aldama has been playing really well this year as well for Memphis. They've got pieces there. This is just another option to give to Taylor Jenkins, who he's going to say, oh, you got me another really nice option to have. Thank you. I'm probably going to play him 18 minutes and he'll probably end up with 12 points and be like +7 on the box score. Because that's just what happens in Memphis. They play so well. John Morant makes everything run. Dylan Brooks is a really good perimeter defender. We'll see what happens with that contract. And Desmond Bane's one of the most improved players again this year. Last year, he was one of the most improved players. He looks even better this year. So Memphis is in a really great spot. Filipowski's just icing on the cake. 25, the Phoenix Suns here now, and a team that looked like maybe they were destined for death, honestly, after what happened in Game 7 last year against the Mavericks. They've rebounded really well. A Damian Lee travel in Game 1 of the regular season has really spurred a lot of things. Obviously, a lot of Suns fans are going to say, whoa, Jeremy Grant traveled against us. Yes, he did. He completely did. But, it makes up for itself, right? So the Phoenix Suns here anyway at 25. They're looking for players that can help them win. And I think Day'Ron Holmes is a really good option here from Dayton. He is a sophomore big who pretty productive, honestly, for the Dayton Flyers. And he's got a lot of the physical tools that you're looking for. And for Chris Paul, that is kind of taking a step back in terms of a score. It's important to get good athletic players at the front court spots like Day'Ron Holmes, who can be good screen and roll partners. Day'Ron Holmes has very good hands, and he's really used to playing in a screen and roll system like we see for Dayton in Anthony Grant's offense, one of the highest screen and roll usages in the entire college program, in the entire nation, to be honest, for Dayton, because of the way that they set up their offense. They basically swing the ball and screen. That's what they do really consistently. It's what got Obi Toppin into a top 10 selection. And I think Day'Ron Holmes here is going to be a lock to be a first round pick as well, unless something crazy happens. He's just going to be a really reliable center, and I think one of the better centers available after pick 15 this year. Pick 26, the Utah Jazz here now. This is their own pick, just like how we all predicted, right? We all thought, hey, Utah's going to be good this year. Wrong. We did not think that, but they played really well this year. And you look at their roster and say, hey, if they actually don't make some of the trades we were expecting, you could see them probably maybe even eating a playoff spot, which not a lot of people were predicting to begin the year. And I have Danny Ainge here taking another big swing, this time for forward Leonard Miller of G League Ignite. Last year went to the NBA Draft Combine, had some exploratory talks with teams about where he could potentially get drafted, and decided to go to the G League Ignite program because he wasn't going to get drafted very high this past year, or maybe not even drafted at all, which I don't think he should have been drafted last year because he was just not good enough. This year, I still don't really believe he's that good of a prospect, but I understand the idea. There's plays that flash with him. He's 6'8". He can handle the basketball. He can make plays on the move. The issues, though, every time he tries to drive the basketball, he has to chicken wing the guy to get by him, which is by rule and by definition an offensive foul in the NBA. Now, do refs call it all the time? No, definitely not. Players get away with it a lot. But Leonard Miller literally has to do it to beat somebody on a drive. He has to. If you watch him, he does it pretty much every single time. Leonard Miller is not a first-round level player, but this shows that, hey, my draft board is not going to mirror my mock drafts this year, because I think Danny Ainge at 26 would probably really consider drafting Leonard Miller, even though I myself, if I was the GM, the president of basketball operations of the Utah Jazz, I would say, no way am I taking Leonard Miller. I could see Danny Ainge still doing it here. And he's going for the upside. I understand it. Leonard Miller, there are some things to really like about his game, but he can't drive and he can't shoot. So those are two things I don't like about his game. But when he does put things together, it does look pretty good. So not trying to harp too much on Leonard Miller. I hope he's successful in the NBA. I hope he succeeds. I just don't believe he will at this point. Pick 27, the Charlotte Hornets on the clock again. This pick comes from the Denver Nuggets. And here for Charlotte, what they're looking to do, add in a wing. We talked about them grabbing Scoot Henderson earlier, second overall. Well, this is one of those where they draft for a fit. They draft for a need right now. And Jordan Walsh, you're looking at a player who really early on for Arkansas through 2 games, he's shooting 75% from the field. He's only 6 of 8, so he's been really selective with what he shoots. But that's what you're going to get from him. He's going to take smart shots. He's going to shoot when he knows he can score. And playing next to 2 gifted creators like LaMelo Ball, Scoot Henderson, if this were to play out this way, would be pretty good for him. I think it would be a really nice outcome. I think he would get, spoon-fed a lot of easy buckets. And Charlotte, they need more athleticism, which is what Walsh really provides on the wing after the whole Miles Bridges situation. Charlotte is really missing the small forward spot, and Jordan Walsh could fill that for them. Probably not as a starting level player right away, but he could come off the bench, probably play quite a bit for the Greensboro Swarm his first year. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. People need to understand that like 55% of players in the NBA played in the G League. It's a pretty normal event and experience, and I think it's a really good development tool for NBA teams. I think Jordan Walsh would be benefited by it as well. Pick 28, the Chicago Bulls here. Now this pick comes from the Portland Trailblazers, who's been playing really awesome basketball. Really happy for that organization. Even without Damian Lillard, they've been playing well. Now that Dame's back, hopefully they can continue that. The Bulls here at this spot, though, they're looking for a center here. Khalil Ware from Oregon, who's been coming off the bench there. He's going to make some noise for Sixth Man of the Year in the Pac-12 if he continues to come off the bench. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if they move him to the starting lineup. He's been playing really good basketball for them through the first couple of games of the season. I think he's someone who's going to be really reliable in the NBA. He's got soft hands. He's going to catch a ton of passes. He's going to shoot around the rim when he's open, and he's got an opportunity to score the basketball. And he's going to play solid, safe positional defense. Now, he's not the most athletic guy. He's not going to jump out of the gym. He's not going to wow you with some of his skill set. But I think he's going to be reliable enough that for a McDonald's All-American, I think he's just a flat-out good basketball player who's going to have a long career in this league, probably as a backup center, but who knows? Maybe in the right situation, maybe he can showcase what he could be as a starter as well. Pick 29, Indiana here now, and the Pacers, third pick of the first round. We've seen them grab some pretty good first-round talent already, and here they're going to go with a guy who I think has some serious upside at this spot. Ryan Rupert, he's playing overseas this year in the NBL. And I think for a player like him who has a decent skill set both on and off the ball, it's all about making and taking shots. We're starting to see that a little bit more this year with his overseas play. And he's also got to put his head down and get to the rim a little bit more. And if he does those things, he's a really, really nice prospect. He's about 6'7", 6'8", can handle the ball a bit. I just want to see him be aggressive and look to score. That's really the one thing that I'm still waiting on here. I think the Pacers getting him would make a lot of sense. They're still looking to add a little bit more to their wings, especially if a Buddy Hield trade does go down. Ryan Rupert would be a really nice option for them to add into their roster. And then pick 30 here, the team that started us off in this mock draft with Victor Wembanyama will also conclude our mock draft here. Pick number 30, the Houston Rockets. I have them going with guard Amari Bailey from UCLA. I've been very vocal about this for a while. The Rockets need to figure out a guard. Kevin Porter Jr. is just not a starting point guard in this league. I think he could be a productive wing. I think he can be one of the more productive six men in the league. I just don't know if he's a point guard that can win you 55 games in a regular season. And that's really tough to do. Not a lot of point guards can do that, but that's the point of the draft, right? You're trying to find players that can help you win 50 to 55 games in a season, get you deep into the playoffs. And for me, I'm just not sold that KPJ can do that in that role. Again, I still think KPJ is a productive player. I'm not sold Amari Bailey can do that either, but it's another stab, right? Ty Washington, they took last year. I'd prefer Washington over Bailey, if I'm being completely honest. But Amari Bailey, there's some hype around him. UCLA, my guess is he will come out this year. He's the reason Dior Johnson decommitted from UCLA. I think there is some talent here. I don't know if this is good enough player to start over a Kevin Porter Jr. a year or two from now. But still, I think Houston needs to explore and find some guys who do play point guard and play some of those guard positions to at least give them opportunities to showcase, hey, can I maybe compete for that starting point guard spot? Amari Bailey probably wouldn't win it, but I think he could maybe have a little bit of a training camp competition, which is always good for the team, and just trying to put your best 5 players out there to start games. Thank you so much for watching. First of all, make sure to leave a like on this video. Second of all, hit that subscribe button. And then third, go follow that Twitter, send us DMs, go ask us our questions. You can also just mention us on Twitter if you'd prefer to do that. Whatever you would like to do. Thanks again so much for watching. Really do appreciate each and every one of you. And until next time, we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.